And that was not my experience at the time. It was quite the contrary. And I get it in the hindsight, because does it impact? There's no doubt it impacts, right?
Right.
It does. It does. I get it. Right. So even staff members, when I shared with them, they were like, oh, we're going to see you. We're going to see you.
Your availability, they saw it go away. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So it was an interesting reaction. Instead of like, I thought it would be, there would be Jose, right, that there would be like this it would coalesce folks around, and they knew what to be supportive. And that wasn't my experience, and you learn to be quiet. And so this is where I learned with one in particular individual, was it like work, like feeling threatened.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas like, wait, who are you to go get a doctorate if I don't have a doctorate? Like, and so like, being, there's nothing more dangerous than a Chicano that's educated. An exaggeration there, but anyway, so Jose, to like your point that there have been moments, your question was like, there have been moments where strategically there's been some like, hey, I got to step back a little bit. And to Argelis' point, both girls have said, and this is why there was this kind of a little bit of a change and a pause. It was like, Dad, you don't have time to play with us. Dad, you don't have time to have dinner with us anymore. Anyway, that was my experience.
So from what I remember, the last situation for yourself was very taxing, like, and you found you got some time to sort of relax, reflect, and maybe get some rest, maybe heal to some extent. Because I definitely identify with what Argelis said. Like in my doctorate program, working full time, doing full time school, I not only gained weight. That's just the most visible part of that sort of situation. But my body was physically reacting. I needed coffee to wake up, and it was hard for me to go to sleep. When I did go to sleep, I had some acid reflux. I couldn't even sleep well. It was, my body was just going crazy. But I'm thinking, like, as you return back to I don't know, the race, the rat race, I don't even know what you want to call it, right? Into these positions again. How do you feel like you're gonna balance that out again? Like, is there anything that you feel like you wanna, can you even, right? Or are you just susceptible to the position itself? I mean, because you think about, like, these are positions that we want to hold, for a lifetime. It's not just like a temporary situation. And so we also want to hold our life together. We don't want to be falling apart all the time. At a certain point, it's going to normalize. These high pressure positions, high, directorships are going to be part of our day-to-day life. And then, okay, how do we balance that?
I think they're an aspect, if I can jump in, there's an aspect where I'm just going to be like upfront in terms of some prior commitments. And there's just kind of it would be different if it's now August, yada. And it's the beginning of the school year. Here's where I don't have all the answers for the last couple. Well, obviously, during COVID, and once the girls started going back to school, then there's flexibility to drop them off and pick them up, right? And you work around it, right? A little bit, not a little bit. You work around it. Even prior to that, Jose, I was working in the same school district that my daughter was going to, and the school was just a few miles away from where I worked, and so it was nice to be able to do that. So there's a little bit of anxiety around, for the last 4 years, 3+ years, 4 years almost, that I've been able to engage in that way as a father in the mornings. And so there's a little bit of guilt with my wife, who then by default it goes back to like, she's all in every morning to drop them off. I'll have to gauge it a little bit to see if I can get enough protection from support staff to be able to say, hey, you all come in 2 days late, and then I come in 2 days late and I
See.
balance that. But I need to go. So I need to go in a little bit knowing that I need to protect the time for a period of time. Remember, this is just a short-term assignment. This is just from now to the end of the school year, and we'll see. Maybe this is it. And then I'm like, hey, that's great. No, I do not want this.
Right.
Or it's like, no, for sure I don't want this. Or here's another opportunity that allows some flexibility, that it could open up at a district office because you're not tied to a school setting. But because teachers can't do that, right? They can't, hey, I'm going to be late one day a week. I'm going to go in and go do my thing. And then, so no soy bien, right? So the optics of it, I have to be really careful going in, and there's a lot of trauma, right? There's a lot of trauma in this space where I'm going in. So Argelis, you were going to share?
No, I think it's that. I think it's knowing how to share where your priorities are, right? Like my girls, my wife, my family, like sharing that with your quote unquote employer, but also going to Jose's point, like what are projects or extra stuff, right? That you're willing to take on that you know is going to pull away from time-wise, or it's going to pull away from your energy to do that, right? So I go back to like the things that I'm doing, right? One of it is I enjoy doing A, B, and C, pero if I don't like doing D, then I got to find somebody to do D, right? Even if I got to pay them, because that D is going to kind of drive me crazy, because either I get frustrated or I can't do it, or it's taking too much time, or or it's not how I envisioned it. So then that just kind of drives me even more up the wall. So some of the stuff that I know is not my strength, I'd rather just outsource it, right? And somebody who I trust, somebody who I know is going to do a good job, and somebody who I believe has proven that they like doing that, or that it's exciting to them. And that adds, in my opinion, that adds that diversity, right? I had a colleague of mine, we went to grad school together. He had a Friday off. The girls had Friday off. Typically, it's a catch-up Friday, right? I do things here or there, or phone calls. And they had Friday off. I was like, okay, so I was supposed to do this project, but let me see if somebody else could sub in for me, give her my cut. And then that kind of takes out Friday for me. And that helped out, right? Like I wasn't super stressed or try to go do that and try to be with the girls and everything. So that helped out to outsource that particular task, that project. And yeah, it didn't quote unquote bring me in that money for that day. But the fact that I wasn't dealing with that stress helped me out. And then now we hit up a good stride, and she's going to help us out with other things down the road. So, but if I didn't, step back and like figure that out, then I would have been trying to do 4 things at the same time, and would have never got that support,
Part of like the questions of mine, I don't have any kids, I don't have a family, and so I don't know what it feels like to have to make those decisions, right? And then those are hardcore decisions to some extent. Like I'm focusing on my needs, but I'm assuming that once once you have a family, your needs just become incorporate other people, right? And those are a priority, just like anything else. I just haven't had to make those decisions as of now in my life. But going back to the point you made, Miguel, about like being supported, like I felt like when you were talking about the district situation, you didn't feel supported. It was just like, deal with it. We don't want to know about it. Just make sure you do your job, kind of thing, And to some extent, even though you're not in the doctorate program anymore, you're done. And to some extent, you're stepping into this new situation. And as a father, as a family man, you are hoping, right, to be supported as well, be able to do your job 100%, but also find ways, creative ways, like, Argelis was talking about, how do we find a middle ground where I can, live up to, my responsibilities at home, and at the same time, do the same amount of work I need to do to live up to my expectations or to my responsibilities here in this position, and that flexibility really does help, even though the optics, as you said, doesn't look good when you can come in late and everybody else can't come in late, right? Being transparent. Like I'm even thinking, like, and you do this very well, I think, like bringing your kids in, right? So they know them, so they get to know them and they know how beautiful they are, and like they know how precious they are to you, and they know that when you're not there, you're actually, invested in that sort of relationship. I don't even know. Like, and so this is the stuff, kind of stuff that I'm thinking as you two are
Yeah.
talking about. You know?
I had the opposite experience though, y'all. I had staff who were super supportive, supervisor who were all about it, and I even left an organization just because I needed to focus more on my program, and everyone was cool about it. My family was super supportive, right? My mom, my wife, my kids were really, really young, but everybody around me was like, "You go do that," and there were some hard times, just like everything, but it felt really embracing. There was a time where I did have a supervisor who I was given an opportunity to do an adjunct class, my first one and everything, and it was a big kibosh. I was like, no, you don't have time for that. And I was like, oh man, like that was one of the dreams, is to teach in higher ed. And it was just kibosh. So I felt that what you just mentioned, right? That it wasn't supportive, because it was like, well, how are you gonna be doing all that and your program and this class? So in my head, I was like, se puede, se puede. So I'll figure it out. Um, Eventually came back around and I was able to do that. And again, now 6 years later, I'm kind of straddling everything, right? But it started there. It started with like that supportive network of professionals, and it was my family, and then it was like colleagues, right? Like people that I could lean on and say, hey, how are you doing it? And let's take a break from this. But yeah, it was a different experience. I don't know if it was because my is more social worky psychological version of it, right? I don't know if that's the folks that were okay with it. Most of the folks who are already doing their masters, not everybody had a doctorate, but the ones who were above me did. So it was kind of like, no, but you got to do what you got to do, and they understood that. And I came in later, I left early, I did stuff at midnight. I mean, just get your issue done. That was the reoccurring theme, right? Like, as long as you get your stuff done, like everything else, it's fine.
Yeah, no. So I mean, that's great. That's great for you. And then I think that for us, it informs us that when we're put in a position, that you mentioned it right now, is that as we create value in other organizations, as we teach, as we work with students, and I can't think if maybe I'm making this up or somebody else said it, which is like, students are right, our students, quote unquote, teach, whether it's elementary school, middle school, high school, college, like they're also dealing with
Right.
the same context, verdad?
Right.
And so it was a good friend of mine, I remember, who was just like, hey, I want to hold these students to high standards and accountability, but I know what's going on. And so I find myself, right, bending over backwards more than I normally am. Like, hey, you gotta, being sometimes firm with some of these deadlines. And I think with our employees, that we create that space and we encourage that, right? So like, hey, cool. Oh, you want to pursue this? Great. Yeah, go get your master's degree. We'll find a way to get it done. And I think it informs us when we get to those places, and folks come to us, that we don't that for sure we're not going to respond and be like, I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. Do that shit on your own time.
Yeah.
No. No, I've had a couple versions of that. Go ahead. Okay, good. I've had a couple of versions where like people get excited about sharing that they're gonna, my new family just starting, or about to move, and people have a reaction, right? Like, why can't you have a kid and I can't have a kid, or why you get to buy a house and I get to buy a house, right? So we have a reaction to things because it's coming out of our ego, not necessarily their success or their celebration, right? So yeah, I felt that too. Like when people are like, another kid, like, hey, mind your business, right? Like, so I think it's more of sort of it's the reaction to it, or as opposed to our celebration.
I'm even thinking that like a lot of times we romanticize certain things. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm specifically talking about whether it be the doctorate, right, or the executive positions, or like these really, and as people who are educators,